Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well out there. And today we're going to head back to slasher film territory, an early 90s slasher film. But before we do that, do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe. Join me here. I greatly would appreciate that. Also, as always, a shameless plug for my TeePublic and my Zazzle store. I'll leave a link for both of those in the description box below. And before we get in this review, just a quick shout out to my buddy Chris Ludit over at his YouTube channel. I'll leave a link for his channel down below. Chris is a big Phoenix Suns fan. He likes movies. Go over and check him out. Tell him I sent you. And today, the movie we are going to talk about is Popcorn. Yes. Popcorn came out February 1st of 1991. It's rated R. It's an hour and 31 minutes long. Couldn't find a budget on it, but upon release, it only made $4.2 million. Now, Popcorn had a very interesting production, and we'll get into that as we go along. This film was directed by, initially, Alan Ormsby, who wrote some films for Bob Clark, and he was fired about 3 weeks into production. We'll talk about that a little bit as we go through it. And Mark Carrier came in to finish the shoot, although some of the cast has said Bob Clark was heavily involved with the decisions behind the scenes. And Mark Carrier was Billy in Porky's 1, Porky's 2, and Porky's Revenge. He's acting in other stuff. He only ever directed a few shorts. This is the only theatrical release that he has directed. He's on, there's a good making of on this film. Jill Schoelen's on it, Mark Carrier's on it, and some of the other casts are on it, and the makeup effects guy. Very interesting, but some of the cast say that Bob Clark was heavily involved with the directing decisions. In this film, our main final girl is played by Jill Schoelen. She was very hot at the time. She plays Maggie. And she was coming off two other horror films from '89 called Cutting Class. Brad Pitt's in that movie. And Phantom of the Opera with Robert Englund, which is a really cool movie. If you've never seen it, check it out. Directed by Dwight Little, who directed Halloween 4. Also in this film is Tom Villard, plays Toby. He is also a film student at this college. And I remember him from Heartbreak Ridge with Clint Eastwood. He is in that film as well. Sadly, he passed away a couple years after this due to AIDS. The Queen, Dee Wallace, is in this film as Suzanne. She is Maggie's mother or caretaker. Ray Walston's in this film. You may ask yourself, who's Ray Walston? Well, if you've ever saw the sitcom from way back in the 60s, My Favorite Martian, he played the Martian on that show, and he's a small part here. And Tom Roberts plays Mr. Davis. He is their teacher. And pretty much, they get this idea for a class project to have a all-night horror-thon to raise some money to spend on some of their films they want to make for this class. So everybody's excited about this, and they discover this film, this lost film made by Lanyard Gates called The Possessor. And they screen it for themselves, and they don't think it's very good, but there's a story behind this film where Lanyard Gates showed this movie at some point. Well, we find out later Maggie was at this screening with her mother, and he decides to try to kill his wife on stage to finish his movie, sets the whole theater on fire. Maggie was able to escape, but some other folks did not. A lot of people died in this fire. Lanyard had this film cult going on. So they have this all-night horror-thon, and people start to die. And Maggie thinks Lanyard Gates is back. And some mysterious things start happening. Well, it all culminates, and we find out that Toby is the real killer, not Lanyard Gates. Lanyard Gates is very much dead. And Toby got burned in that fire as a child, and he's grown up, and he wants revenge on Maggie and the whole class, even though they really had nothing to do with it. Maggie was a child. She was just there. So he's just a little jealous that she made it out and he didn't. And he talks about how he had to go through all these skin grafts, and now to disguise himself, because he ends up being different people throughout the movie, he has this makeup technology making these latex masks, like very much like a makeup effects artist. And he's able to portray different characters throughout the movie, or Toby himself, what he used to look like. And at the end, they end up dispatching of him. He gets killed, and that's the end of Popcorn. So what do I like about this film? This was a staple of my video store rental days. I used to rent this film at least once or twice a year. I always enjoyed this one. I'm going to say it up front, put my cards on the table. I used to rent this a lot from my video store of choice, Broad Street Video in Tamaqua, Pennsylvania. I will say, this isn't the greatest horror film, but what I do like about it, I think the cast is pretty good. I like the setup. I like the idea of they're having this film marathon, and most of the movie takes place at this movie theater. And I always love stuff that takes place at a movie theater, and a horror movie surrounding that just speaks to me. I think, Tom Villard he's great as Toby. He's great as the villain and as this nice, one of their fellow students. Jill Schoelen was the it girl back then for a lot of low budget horror, and she's good here. As everybody's good. Dee Wallace, of course. Dee Wallace could do a role like this in her sleep, and she's great here as well as the mother figure. The makeup effects, especially on Toby, the mask thing, look great. They're very well done. So they definitely did a really nice job with all that stuff. And I like the old setup where they're showing black and white movies, these old movies that were shot for the film specifically, but they're using the old William Castle tricks, like a flying mosquito across the thing. They're putting smelly smoke into the theater to give off the stench from the movie they're playing, or they're electrocuting people in the butt during the one movie that's like the Electric Fire. I like all that stuff. They bring that all back into it, the showmanship of it. And the kills are nothing, they're not overly, this movie isn't overly bloody. It's very much an R-rated movie, but it's not overly bloody. So I do enjoy this film. Is there any negatives? There's some plot holes, either that or it was plot points that were cut out. Because at certain points of the movie, there's certain things that happen that give you the impression that the killer is supernatural, which we find out later he is not. Very gifted at makeup effects, but not supernatural. So there's a moment where Suzanne, played by Dee Wallace, goes to the theater because she thinks Lanyard Gates is still alive, and she goes with a gun to kill him because she doesn't want him hurting Maggie. And she stands out front of the theater, and the marquee has the sign lights up "Possessor," and the letters start shooting out at her, which leads you to believe that he might be supernatural, but he's not. So that scene doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And they never explain it. They don't explain how he pulled that off. So I don't know if that was a plot point that was cut out. Maybe it was in the original script and it just didn't work, so they cut it out but they left that scene. I don't know. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And the other thing with a movie like this, with Toby jumping around so much, it would be impossible to be where he ends up, even with all the tech that he has and he's able to create these masks the way he does throughout the film. It's a plot point. It's a plot hole. But I enjoyed this film enough that I go with it. This movie is certainly not perfect by any stretch, but it's a movie I've always enjoyed. It's a damn fine slasher film from the early 90s. Unfortunately, it didn't do too well upon release. Now, the production for this film was very strange. The one producer who had some money to put into this film really wanted to start up the movie industry, like filming in Jamaica. So they filmed this in Kingston, Jamaica. That movie theater is in Kingston, Jamaica. And it's why there's reggae music throughout the film. Because whatever deals they made, they use reggae music in the film. There's a reggae band in between the movies when the lights go out, entertaining the crowd till they get the lights back on. So there's a couple things that don't make a whole lot of sense, because this is very much supposed to take place in America, but there's all this reggae music. It's just very, and you can tell it's not an American city, but that's where they shot it, in Jamaica. And then Alan Ormsby, who was a good friend of Bob Clark, wrote some movies for Bob Clark, got fired 3 weeks into production. He shot all the black and white films, the films within the film, but then on set they said, I guess he was taking too long. They weren't impressed with the footage he was getting, so they ended up letting him go. Bob Clark called Mark Harrier because they were friends, brought him in, and he directed the rest of the film. Even Jill Schoelen wasn't the original Maggie. There was another actress that shot for 3 weeks in that role with all these other actors. Like, they had their own little family unit, and then they let her go because they weren't happy with her performance, and they brought Jill Schoelen in. So when they reshot some of the scenes that were already filmed, they just shot Jill Schoelen's side of the scene. So she'd be on set by herself, reacting to nothing, because the other actors already shot those scenes and they couldn't afford to go back to reshoot them. So there was a lot of changing around on this film. And again, like I said, on the making of documentary on this film, it said that Bob Clark was ghost directing some of this movie. Whether that's true or not, but some of the cast do claim that is the case. Other than that, I like this film. This is a film from my childhood. I remember renting this, again, from Broad Street Video in Tamacco, Pennsylvania, at least once or twice a year. I enjoyed it that much. This Blu-ray has a nice transfer on it. It sounds good. It has that documentary that runs about 35, 40 minutes long. So it's totally worth it if you're a fan of this film. At the end of the day, I would give Popcorn a solid 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10 for Popcorn. Have you ever seen this film? Leave a comment down below. Let me know. Hit the thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button. Share this video. I greatly would appreciate that as well. Until next time, bye.